Welcome to Longevity Industries' presentation of the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I'm your host, Dean Phillips. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Precision Metal Forming Association and the PMA's Educational Foundation, for all of their great work. Today, my guest, I have with me Lee Ellard. He comes to us from Stamtec metal stamping and forming equipment, and he is the North American sales manager. Welcome, Lee.
Morning, Dean.
It's great to have you here. I'm glad you had a little bit of time you could carve out today for us. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. No problem. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you. And so right off the bat, what is your big key takeaway for the destiny of manufacturing? What is it, the biggest thing that's going to be the changes on the horizon for us?
Well, in a macro sense, I think that we're going to continue to see more and more automation, and that being tied in with artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things. These are all kind of, I know you read and hear a lot about this, but it really is happening now. Especially automation is an immediate thing that I see happening more and more, and particularly in my industry, or our industry, which is metal stamping.
And do you think that that's related to the very tight workforce development issues?
Yeah, that has something to do with it for sure. But I think it's also the old, robots or automation. They come to work every day. They don't get sick. And once you get them set up, they do repetitive tasks safely and without ergonomic issues. And over time, that cost of those robots is spread out over time. So I think they're just more cost effective. It's probably more driven by just cost effective productivity, I think. But it certainly is exacerbated by the difficulty in workforce development, I would say.
Right. Now, speaking of repetitive tasks, there's a lot of times when we look at certain segments of what we do, it is a huge issue of finding something that we do over and over again with ergonomic challenges. That can be an issue for our workers. Do you see in the future getting more away from having manual work done by people and moving more into automation and then retraining those people?
Well, we hope that's what happens, because the people obviously will need jobs. And I think history has proven that this usually does happen. I mean, there are a lot of studies that show that automation doesn't actually reduce the number of jobs. People lose the job they're currently doing, which is a manual labor type job, but they do get retrained to do something else. They've got to do something else. So, and right now we're sitting at under 3% unemployment. That's a pretty good indication that people are getting reemployed.
Yeah.
Even though automation is taking away, a lot of the jobs that people used to do.
Right. Yeah. Because otherwise that would have gone through the roof with some of the retraining numbers. You wouldn't see that number would be way up there if that was what was happening, but it's not. So,
right.
So tell me a little bit about your background, how you got involved in metal forming.
Well, I actually come from a small family business where we were in the automotive aftermarket parts business. And some of our suppliers, obviously a lot of automotive parts are made from steel. And at some point I decided, I needed to spread my wings and leave the family business, and going to one of my suppliers was a natural move. So I checked out some of my suppliers that manufactured the parts that we bought, and eventually ended up getting a job in industrial sales. And eventually I ended up selling industrial equipment with a company called Pearl Equipment Company in Nashville. And so I've been selling basically all types of metal stamping, mostly metal stamping, but all types of metal working equipment for about 30 years now.
Yeah, once it gets in your blood, it's tough to get out, isn't it?
Yeah. Whether it's good or bad, that seems to be the case.
Yeah. And I think that in general, most people that are in this industry, you bond a very strong relationship. And it's one that you can feel good about. You know that you're making a difference. You know that you're impactful to manufacturing as a whole. And you know that you can say, hey, our equipment built that.
Yeah. You can point to something tangible. You're not just doing, theoretical work or service work. You're actually helping produce something tangible. And that's a pretty good feeling.
Yes, absolutely. What do you see as some of the other challenges that we have in the stamping industry that need to be addressed?
Well, some of the other technologies that are, actually the stamping industry was, I'm not sure how much bigger, but it was tremendously bigger, after World War II, all the way through the 70s and into the 80s. But gradually, these new technologies have replaced a lot of what once were stamping jobs or applications. It started out, I guess, first with the turret punch, which enabled you to use, modular tooling to quickly change over to certain jobs, and you wouldn't have to build all the expensive dies and tooling for stamping. So turret punches, and then, of course, lasers and other fabrication techniques, more advanced CNC press brakes and that sort of thing. They've all taken a dent out of metal stamping, and also the trend toward short runs of smaller amounts of products and a lot of variety of products, so you're not stamping out millions and millions of the same thing like in the old days. So
right. And it takes a lot of work to get to the point of hard tooling a project. It's easier if you can use some type of flexible manufacturing, like turrets, like press brakes, and other types of
lasers.
Yeah. Absolutely. And all of those do have an impact on the greater picture of stamping.
Right.
Because
stamping has dwindled as far as the amount of stamping. And in the U.S. it's dwindled because a lot of the stamping has moved overseas as well. But stamping in general is not as big as it used to be. And we'll continue to face challenges. Now we've got 3D printing is another, or additive manufacturing. It's another technology that's disrupting a little bit more out from stamping. But, the survivors in stamping, there's still a place for us when you got high production runs of, especially of repetitive parts. So, we still got, that's always going to be there, I believe. And then, of course, new servo press technology is giving us a little more flexibility and a little more ability to do shorter run jobs and jobs that are difficult to do in just a standard mechanical stamping press. So we're not dead, and we're still kicking and surviving and innovating, and that's going to continue, I believe.
Yeah, our demise has been greatly exaggerated.
Yes, right. Yeah, like Mark Twain said.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated.
That's right. Hey, tell me now. You mentioned servo presses, so tell me a little bit about how that offers a lot more opportunities in the manufacturing industry.
Well, there are certain parts that, number one, are very difficult to form in a standard mechanical press. And, with the servo press's ability to vary the slide velocity and the slide motion profile almost infinitely within a range, even during one stroke of the press, you can do so many things to make a part better, such as slow down to do a particular form in the part, better, and then speed up extremely fast when you don't need to be running slow. So you can go fast during the non-working portion of the stroke, extremely slow at all or part of the working portion of the stroke. Of course, you can reverse direction. You can even dwell right at the bottom, kind of like hydraulic press would be able to do.
Right.
And still be supplying full working energy. And this is, of course, enabled because you're no longer depending on a flywheel to supply your working energy like you do in a mechanical press.
Right.
All the working energy is supplied directly from the servo motor. So you can do just about anything you want to as far as speed and slide motion. So slide velocity and slide motion. And that enables you to do a lot of things, particularly for forming, but also you might want to do secondary operations in the die, such as staking, tapping, in-die welding, and these things that you can do when you're able to run the slide at different motions, crank positions, and velocities.
Excellent. I think it's often overlooked what dwell adds for people. When I started off in fabrication, on the press brake side, I learned a huge lesson in how valuable dwelling can be, because on the fabrication side, your solution for dealing with the spring back in the material is you just go deeper into the die and you make a tighter bend and then allow it to spring back. Well, you can only allow that so much without having collision issues or bottoming out the tool before that becomes a problem. Most people don't understand that aspect or see the benefit of dwelling. Do you feel that you have to do a lot of retraining of and understanding for the engineers that don't understand some of the benefits of servo presses?
Yeah, in fact, I think the bottleneck right now is not at all in the technology itself, or even the ability to use the technology. It's really in thinking of how you can use the technology. And that starts with, first of all, the end user thinking of, well, how can we make this part better? Even if they don't technically know how to do it, how can we make this part better? And brainstorming some ideas. What problems are we having with this part? Where are we having the problems? Then talking to your tool and die maker. And then you have to have a tool and die maker who's open-minded and thinks kind of outside of the box, to use an overused term.
Yeah.
To just be creative in how can you take this die and change it and change the stations within it to take advantage of slower slide velocity, dwelling, reversing and releasing the material a little bit, or just stopping at multiple points as you go through, speeding up and slowing down even as you go through the working portion of the stroke. All of these things require some real thought and some trial and error and some experimentation with the end user and the tooling company working together. And that's where the real bottleneck is right now. And it'll continue to get better as people learn how to use the technology within a die.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about how much change you have to have within your people to think of these opportunities. It's like when you get a new tool and you used to just use a hammer for everything. Now it's like, well, wow, I can use this screwdriver and I've got this tool and I've got that and I've got these pliers, and you start thinking about, well, how would I use these? We've grown up with a lot of these tools, but when something new comes along, it changes the way you think about things.
Right, and some of it's just actually using the technology, and you'll come up with ways that you hadn't thought of as you're beginning to just use the technology hands-on. I liken it sometimes to, like, now this is going to date me, and you might remember this as well, but do you remember when people said, what in the world am I going to do with a personal computer? What would I need that for? Right? Well, now, we're carrying around a supercomputer. I'm talking on one right now.
Right.
Practically.
Yep.
And you don't know what you would do without a computer. But there are hundreds or thousands of ways that you use a computer that nobody thought of.
Right.
Until you started using them, then you're like, oh, well, I can do this, I can do that. And all the things that you can do with a computer now, probably 90% of it was thought of after we started using personal computers.
Yeah, no question about that. That's a great example because I think in the day they were just used for computation and doing calculations most of the time. And it wasn't until later that we started developing programs, which is kind of what dictates what's important to us. And we, especially on phones and on tablets, you're absolutely right. That has changed up the world of opportunity. Was the other people thinking of ways to use it. And I think you're right. I think servo presses also will have a very similar path where other people that are using the technology will develop the ideas around it.
Yes, absolutely. And some guys are doing that now and already seeing huge increases in productivity and, die life and machine wear. And there are a lot of areas where the servo technology is going to help a lot. That said, I'm not one of these people that believes that standard mechanical presses are going to just disappear. We still sell 90% mechanical presses. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because we're more focused on mechanical presses than some of the other manufacturers. But part of it is because there's still a lot of people, and it'll take many years, and they won't ever completely go away, but there's still a lot of people that they're really good at doing it the old way. Mm-hmm. And they know how to do that. And they don't have the time and resources and money to, one, spend on a very expensive press on the front end, but two, spend a lot of time and money and effort and resources to develop the use of that technology and, build new dies. All this costs a lot of money. And some people just don't have the, the capital and the desire to do all that. And they'll continue to do it the old way and still be successful at it because they can still be pretty efficient, very efficient that way.
Right.
In certain parts, you may not get that much benefit from a servo press. If you're running an extremely flat part that you can just run full speed, and you're running 1 billion of them a year, you just need a big hammer, a big fast hammer.
Right.
And the mechanical press can still be the way to go in that.
Sure. And I think you hit it on the head that there are opportunities for both types of equipment. And I think that will continue to be the case because, as you said, not every single part needs to have the flexibility. And because of that, we have the options. I think that's a good thing to have as options, whether or not we want to continue doing it the way we have, which has worked just fine and can still continue to work fine with gaining some of the other improvements within the newer presses. But you don't need a servo press at a higher cost than that, and you can better spend that money elsewhere.
Right.
When we talk about that, I think, you mentioned too about that the challenge falls into, do you have the workforce too? And can they be developed? Do you have the tooling workforce? Do you have the engineering workforce to develop the products that fit that? And that's a bigger picture problem that takes a lot more time to accomplish. Do you think that that's going to be a 5-year thing, or is that more further than that?
As far as like the
training,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Training your tool and die people, and as well as designing parts that fit those applications.
Oh yes, at least a 5-year. I mean, it'll be longer than that. I mean, it's going to continue to develop, just like as using the example again of computer usage. What do you use it for? I mean, how long has that been going on? For 30 years, and you keep finding new ways to use computers. But I think a lot will happen within 10 years. But, it's taken servo press a lot longer to develop, even though it's been talked about a lot. And certainly a lot more have been sold in recent years. But it's still taken a lot longer. It has taken a lot longer to develop, I think, than some people thought it would. And even some manufacturers even thought that they were just going to completely go servo and really sell only servo, and that has not panned out either.
Right. You mentioned earlier about AI and IoT applications that where you see a lot more improvement coming. In what ways do you see AI and IoT fitting into the big picture for metal forming?
Well, basically being able to monitor and gather more information about the job that you're doing, and that would be your IoT. Being able to just collect massive amounts of data, especially when we've basically been collecting no data for most of the history of metal stamping. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I think you guys have a networking application that's probably getting very popular now. But tying all those things together is going to give us so much data that we can improve how we manufacture.
Right. And acting on that data is a huge key too. Are we actually using that information, because that will dictate so much of how that data is useful. Right. Because it's not useful if you don't use it.
Right. So I think we use the IoT, which includes having sensors and monitoring of all a lot of different kinds of monitors and sensors. Tying that all together and then using AI to process it and to make changes to the way we do things.
Do you see
and then some automation? I think that also will enable more automation.
What changes do you see coming down the road that you'll be glad to see moving away from and leaving in the dust? Are there things that you'll be glad over the next 5 years that we won't be doing anymore?
Well, although it'll be not without challenges to set up automation, I think when you don't have people working in dangerous, dirty, I won't say demeaning jobs, but jobs that may not be that fulfilling and they're repetitive and difficult and not very well respected sometimes. I think I would like to see more and more automation. Even to the point where you have a robot doing a simple job like just press tending, unloading and loading one part in a press. Doesn't have to be like extremely complicated automation, but they're simple jobs like that. I mean, I kind of look forward to seeing that. And maybe some people really enjoy those types of jobs, but to me, they're difficult, they're dangerous, to me, it would not be very rewarding. So I'd like to see people doing, or less people doing those types of jobs.
Sure. They're non-value added jobs, and they're jobs that create more risk than reward, where people handling parts is always at risk of somebody getting injured, whether it's an ergonomic issue, whether it's a sharp part that happens to catch somebody in a place that they're not guarded. They don't have proper PPE, and it's not all over your whole body. It's not like you're in a suit, just on your arms. Right. So it's very easy to still cut your shirt or cut in a lot of areas with those parts. So yeah, I could see that by getting away from handling the parts, that adds no real value. There's no value added in handling parts.
Right.
What do you see from the millennials that is a benefit that they have when they come into a workforce that they can provide, that perhaps as you said earlier, us older dogs can learn from?
Well, I think they are not nearly as opposed to new technologies and technology in general. They're just a lot more comfortable with it, having grown up with it, and they actually lean toward, look, I want to find a way to work smarter, not harder. You know, and I think that's something that the millennials and now we got the Z generation coming up,
right,
are going to be much better at than we were. You know, we were just like, work hard, get the job done. When the boss says, jump, you say how high, and
right.
you don't. But these guys question more, and they look for better, more innovative ways to do things. So I think that's a big value that the millennials and the younger people nowadays are bringing to the workforce.
Excellent.
And to society.
Yeah, I agree. Well, sir, I am just about out of time here, and I want to thank again Lee Ellard for being here on our show, and thank the Precision Metal Forming Association for helping us put this show on. Go out there and make it a great day.